This video discusses the engine coupling to the alternator. Normally, the alternator is a single bearing machine and the interface between engine and alternator is adapter and disc coupling. This coupling arrangement is denoted as MD35. You will see MD35 written in general arrangement drawings for alternators. General safety practices in lifting and handling of major items such as the engine and alternator are to be observed. We concentrate here specifically on the critical tightening of the coupling discs and the checking of bearing clearance at the non-drive end of the alternator. Each engine has flywheel housing and flywheel dimensions in accordance with SAE, which is the Society of Automotive Engineers. The alternator has a variety of SAE couplings available to suit the most popular engines available. From the alternator perspective, the SAE selections available and critical dimensions are shown here. Please note that the SAE standards also state a clearance around the coupling which is not always honoured by the engine manufacturer. Occasionally, a turbocharger bracket or other engine part will interfere with the alternator adapter flange. In this case, please refer to Macalty to see if an engineered option exists for that engine. The distance between the mating faces of the coupling discs to flywheel and the alternator adapter to engine flywheel housing are critical and should be checked before ordering the alternator and then again before assembly. The dimension or distance between the mating faces of the flywheel housing and the flywheel itself is generally known as the AN dimension, and this will correspond directly to the SAE size of the coupling disc used. Each alternator delivered from Macalty has a warning label attached to the coupling discs. Although discs are secured at the factory in a quality control process, we ask our customers to check the bolts are tightened correctly before assembly to the engine. If you have a requirement to change the coupling discs from one size to another once the alternator has been delivered, then advise Macalty or the local agent of the SAE dimensions you require. You will receive the replacement discs and spacers required to fit between the shaft and discs and a new set of bolts if the length of the AN dimension has changed. The torque settings for these bolts is shown here. Coupling disc combinations with spacers have various arrangements as shown here. Please be sure to select the one appropriate to the alternator model and the coupling disc arrangement selected. Note that some engines have flywheels with more than one recess for different size discs with different AN dimensions. Before assembly to the engine, please make sure that the alternator adapter flange has the mating face cleared of its rust prevention covering. For the connection to the engine, please ensure you have the correct grade, thread and length of bolt according to the engine manufacturer's recommendations. You should also be aware of the torque required in tightening these bolts. I refer you to the manual of the alternator supplied. Some alternators require the rotor to be pushed forward and in some cases removed from the frame prior to assembly to the engine flywheel. Others have a pinch bolt securing the fan and a single scalloped fan blade to rotate, enabling access to locate and tighten each coupling bolt to the flywheel. Tighten all bolts securing coupling discs to flywheel and be sure to locate the coupling discs inside the flywheel recess to ensure the alternator rotor runs concentrically with the engine. Failure to do so will result in severe vibration and likely irreparable damage to alternator rotor and stator. Fix the alternator adapter flange to the engine flywheel housing in accordance with the manual instructions and with bolts and torque settings dictated by the engine supplier. Ensure the rear bearing resits into its housing if the rotor has been removed or pulled forward during assembly. Assuming all dimensions are correct and that the AN dimension is as it should be, you should now look at the rear of the alternator to check that there is clearance between the bearing and the bearing seat. Once the alternator is assembled with the engine and you check the rear bracket to see the bearing clearance, you should see between 1 and 3 mm of clearance depending on the model of alternator.